Good morning and welcome to Fireplace Conversations. I am Dr. Ikechukwu Okoh, and today I want to have a deeply honest conversation with you about something that many of us in leadership positions face but rarely discuss openly. Pour yourself a warm drink, settle in, and let me share something with you that I wish someone had told me years ago when I first stepped into leadership. The fire is crackling softly behind me, and there is something about this setting that invites vulnerability, that creates space for the kinds of truths we often keep locked away in our executive suites and offices. Today we are going to talk about the loneliness of leadership. When I look back at my journey into leadership, I remember all the things people told me to expect. They talked about vision, how I'd need to see around corners and paint pictures of futures that didn't yet exist. They spoke about influence, the art of moving people toward common goals without wielding authority like a weapon. They discussed team building, driving results, making an impact that would ripple far beyond my immediate sphere. But here is what they didn't tell me. Here is what no one prepares you for. The quiet. The profound, sometimes overwhelming quiet that settles in during those spaces between meetings. The weight that presses down on your shoulders when everyone else has left the room and you are the only one left holding the decision. It is a strange kind of solitude, this leadership loneliness. It is not the kind where you are physically alone. Lord knows, as leaders, we are rarely alone in that sense. We are in back-to-back meetings, surrounded by team members, constantly connected through devices that never seem to stop buzzing with urgent requests for our attention. No, this is different. This is the kind of loneliness that exists even when people surround you. It is the isolation that comes from being the final decision maker, from carrying responsibilities that you can't fully delegate, from holding information that you can't always share, from having to project strength when you feel uncertain. I remember a particular evening about 7 years into my leadership journey. I had just made a decision that would affect the livelihoods of dozens of people on my team. It was the right decision. I knew it then and I know it now, but it was also incredibly difficult. After the final meeting, after I communicated the changes, after I answered questions and provided reassurance, I found myself sitting in my office as the sun set through the windows. The building had grown quiet. My team had gone home to their families, to their evening routines, to lives that could, for the most part, be compartmentalized from work. But I sat there carrying the weight of that decision, replaying conversations, anticipating consequences, preparing for the challenges that would inevitably arise. That's when it hit me, this profound sense of being alone with the consequence of leadership. Now, if you're listening to this and you're in a leadership position, I want you to know that what you might be feeling is not unusual. It's not an indication that you're not cut out for leadership. But first, let's be honest about what this loneliness looks like in practice. The loneliness of leadership is real, it's common, and more importantly, it's something we can address. It's not a sign of weakness. It shows up in different ways for different people, but there are some common threads that I've observed both in my own experience and in conversations with leaders across various industries. There's the isolation that comes from information asymmetry. As leaders, we often have access to information that we can't share broadly, strategic decisions that are still information, sensitive personal issues, financial realities that could create panic if communicated prematurely. This necessary confidentiality can create a barrier between us and our teams even when we don't want it to. I think about the months I spent knowing about the financial problems the organization is having, unable to discuss my concerns with my direct reports, unable to process the implications with the people who would be most affected. The burden of that knowledge was heavy, and the isolation it created was palpable. Then there's the loneliness that comes from being the final decision maker. Even in collaborative environments, there comes a moment when all the input has been gathered, all the perspectives have been shared, and someone needs to choose a path forward. That someone is you. Your team can debate the options, they can argue passionately for their preferred approaches, but at the end of the day, they get to go home knowing they've done their part. You go home carrying the weight of the choice and all its potential consequences. I learned this lesson viscerally during a product launch that didn't go as planned. We had spent months in development, had gathered feedback from multiple stakeholders, had run tests and focus groups. When it came time to decide whether to move forward with the launch despite some lingering concerns, the final call was mine. The product launch struggled. Not catastrophically, but enough to impact revenue and morale. In the post-mortem meetings, team members could analyze what went wrong, suggest improvements for next time, even express frustration about the outcome. But I was the one who had to live with the knowledge that I could have made a different choice. I was the one who had to face the board and explain not just what went wrong, but why I had chosen to proceed despite the warning signs. That's a special kind of loneliness, being accountable not just for your own actions, but for the consequences of decisions made with incomplete information under time pressure. There's also what I call the loneliness of perspective. As you move higher in an organization, your view changes. You start to see systems and interconnections that aren't visible from other vantage points. You begin to understand trade-offs and constraints that your team members might not fully grasp. This expanded perspective is valuable. It's part of why you're in the role, but it can also be isolating. I remember trying to explain to a frustrated team member why we couldn't pursue a particular initiative that seemed obviously beneficial from her perspective. From where she sat, it looked like a simple resource allocation decision. From where I sat, I could see how it would impact 3 other departments, strain our already stretched budget, and potentially derail 2 other strategic priorities. I couldn't fully explain all of these considerations without violating confidences or overwhelming her with complexity. So I had to make a decision that looked arbitrary from her perspective, knowing that I couldn't provide the full context that would help her understand. That kind of necessary opacity creates distance, even when you don't want it to. The loneliness of leadership also manifests in the challenge of authentic relationships within your organization. When you're responsible for people's career advancement, compensation, and sometimes their continued employment, it changes the dynamic of your relationships with them. They may hesitate to disagree with you, to share bad news, or to be fully honest about their concerns. This creates what I think of as an authenticity gap. Your team members may be genuine in their interactions with you, but they're not necessarily being completely unguarded. There's often a level of performance of careful consideration about how their words and actions might be interpreted. This isn't malicious or manipulative. It's human nature to be somewhat strategic in our interactions with people who have power over our professional lives. But for you as the leader, it can create a sense of isolation. You may find yourself wondering what people really think, whether the positive feedback you're receiving is genuine or performative, whether you're getting the full picture when people report to you. I went through a period where I became almost paranoid about this. I found myself analyzing every interaction, looking for signs of what people weren't telling me. It was exhausting and frankly not very productive. But it highlighted for me how leadership can create barriers to the kind of straightforward relationships that many of us crave. And then there's the loneliness that comes from the weight of responsibility for others. When you're leading people, their professional success, their job satisfaction, sometimes their financial security becomes part of your responsibility. I think about the most difficult conversation I've ever had to have as a leader. I had to let go of someone who had been with the organization for over a decade, someone who had given their best effort, but whose skills had not evolved with the changing needs of the organization. You make decisions, not just thinking about business outcomes, but about how those outcomes will affect real people with mortgages and children and dreams. It was the right business decision, but it meant telling someone who had trusted me with their career that we could no longer provide them with the security they had counted on. That conversation haunted me for weeks. Not because I questioned the decision, I didn't, but because of the weight of its human impact. My team members could sympathize, could offer support, but ultimately I was the one who had looked another human being in the eye and changed the trajectory of their life. That kind of responsibility can be profoundly isolating. It's a burden that you can't really share, because sharing it fully would require your team members to carry a weight that isn't theirs to bear. Now, let me be clear about something. I'm not sharing these examples to evoke pity or to suggest that leadership is some kind of martyrdom. Leadership is a privilege. It comes with rewards, both tangible and intangible, that make the challenges worthwhile for many of us. But I think it's important to acknowledge the loneliness honestly, because when we don't, when we pretend it doesn't exist or that strong leaders should simply power through it, we set ourselves up for more serious problems. I've seen it lead to decision fatigue, where leaders become so worn down by the weight of constant choice making that their decision-making quality deteriorates. The ability to influence positive change, to help others grow, to build something meaningful, these are genuine compensations for the difficulties. Unaddressed leadership loneliness can manifest in several harmful ways. I've watched it contribute to a kind of emotional numbing, where leaders disconnect from their own feelings and those of others as a protective mechanism. In some cases, leadership loneliness can lead to what I call the strongman syndrome, an overcompensation where leaders feel they must project invulnerability at all costs. This often results in increasingly authoritarian behavior, decreased willingness to seek input, and a growing distance between the leader and their team. I've also seen leadership loneliness contribute to burnout, to anxiety, and to a gradual erosion of the empathy and emotional intelligence that are so crucial to effective leadership. When you're constantly managing the weight of solitary decision-making, it can be tempting to reduce complex human situations to simple variables, to lose sight of the individual stories behind the spreadsheets. Perhaps most concerning, leadership loneliness can create a vicious cycle. The more isolated a leader feels, the more likely they are to make decisions that further isolate them. They may become less transparent, less collaborative, more controlling, all in an attempt to manage the anxiety that comes with feeling alone in their responsibilities. But here's what I want you to know, what I wish someone had told me years ago. Leadership loneliness is addressable. It's not an inevitable consequence of responsibility. It's a challenge that can be managed, mitigated, and sometimes even transformed into a source of strength. The key is recognizing that addressing leadership loneliness isn't about eliminating the inherent solitude that comes with certain aspects of leadership. Some decisions will always rest ultimately with you. Some information will always need to be held confidentially. Some perspectives will always be unique to your position. But we can create structures and practices that provide connection, support, and perspective without compromising our leadership effectiveness. We can find ways to process the weight of our responsibilities without burdening our teams inappropriately. We can build relationships that offer genuine support while maintaining appropriate boundaries. So how do we do this? Let me share some approaches that I've found helpful, both in my own experience and in working with other leaders who have struggled with this challenge. The first and perhaps most important strategy is what I call creating safe circles. These are relationships, either individual or group-based, where you can speak honestly about the challenges of leadership without fear of judgment, betrayal, or misunderstanding. A safe circle might be a peer group of leaders from other organizations who face similar challenges but don't have any direct stake in your specific decisions. It might be a relationship with a mentor who has walked the leadership path before you and can offer perspective. It could be a professionally facilitated leadership group or even a carefully chosen relationship with a coach or counselor who understands the unique pressures of leadership. The key characteristics of a safe circle are trust, confidentiality, and mutual understanding. These are people who understand that leadership involves difficult trade-offs, who won't judge you for struggling with decisions that have no perfect answers, and who can offer perspective without having their own agenda about your specific situation. I found my safe circle somewhat accidentally. I was attending a conference and ended up in a late-night conversation with 3 other leaders from different industries. We started talking about a challenge one of us was facing, and before long we were all sharing experiences that we had never articulated to anyone else. That conversation was so valuable that we decided to formalize it. We now meet quarterly, either in person or virtually, for what we jokingly call our leadership therapy sessions. The value of this group cannot be overstated. We share challenges, offer perspectives, and provide each other with the kind of honest feedback that's hard to get elsewhere. When I'm struggling with a difficult decision, I know I have people I can call who will understand the complexity, who won't offer simplistic solutions, and who will help me think through implications I might not have considered. When I'm doubting myself, they can offer perspective on whether my concerns are reasonable or if I'm catastrophizing. When I'm celebrating a success, they understand the relief and satisfaction in a way that my team members who weren't carrying the weight of uncertainty simply can't. If you don't currently have relationships like this, I encourage you to actively seek them out. Look for leadership groups in your industry or community. Consider working with an executive coach who specializes in leadership challenges. Reach out to other leaders whose judgment you respect and suggest regular check-ins. The investment of time and vulnerability required to build these relationships is significant, but the return is invaluable. Having people who understand the unique challenges of leadership can be the difference between thriving and merely surviving in your role. Another crucial strategy is what I call strategic vulnerability. This involves being selectively open about your challenges and uncertainties in ways that actually strengthen rather than undermine your leadership effectiveness. Now, I want to be careful here because there's a difference between strategic vulnerability and emotional dumping. You don't want to burden your team members with anxieties that are yours to carry. You don't want to create insecurity by sharing every doubt you have about major decisions. For example, you might acknowledge when a decision is difficult, even if you can't share all the factors that make it so. But there are ways to be appropriately open about the challenges of leadership that can actually deepen trust and connection with your team. You might admit when you don't have all the answers while still projecting confidence in your ability to work through the challenges. You might share your thinking process about decisions even when you can't share all the information that informs that process. I remember a situation where our organization was facing significant budget constraints that would require difficult choices about staffing and programs. I couldn't share all the financial details that informed my understanding of the situation, but I could acknowledge that we were facing tough decisions and that I was working through how to make choices that would be fair to everyone while preserving the organization's long-term health. This kind of transparency, sharing the fact that challenges exist and decisions are complex, even when you can't share every detail, can actually strengthen trust. It shows your team that you're thoughtful and careful about major decisions rather than arbitrary or detached. Strategic vulnerability also involves admitting when you make mistakes, owning them fully, and demonstrating how you learn from them. This doesn't undermine your authority. It actually strengthens it by showing that you're committed to continuous improvement and that you don't expect perfection from your team if you don't expect it from yourself. I once made a hiring decision that didn't work out well. Rather than trying to minimize my role in the mistake, I was direct with my team about what I had learned from the experience and how it would inform future hiring decisions. This honesty actually increased trust and made team members more comfortable bringing concerns to me early, knowing I would receive them as information rather than criticism. These are regular practices that help you process the emotional and psychological weight of leadership and reconnect with your sense of purpose and perspective. For some leaders, this might involve regular physical exercise that provides both stress relief and thinking time. Another essential element of managing leadership loneliness is developing restorative rhythms. For others, it might be meditation, journaling, or other reflective practices. The key is consistency and intentionality. These aren't just activities you do when you have time, but practices you prioritize because they're essential to your leadership effectiveness. My own restorative rhythm involves early morning walks to the gym. There's something about the combination of physical movement, fresh air that helps me process whatever I'm carrying from the previous day and prepare mentally for what lies ahead. During these walks, I often find myself thinking through challenges in a different way than I do in my office. The change of environment, the physical movement, and the absence of digital distractions create space for insights that don't emerge during more structured problem-solving sessions. I also keep a leadership journal where I write about significant decisions, challenging situations, and lessons learned. This isn't a daily practice, I don't have time for that, but I try to capture major experiences and my reflections on them. Over time, this journal has become a valuable resource for recognizing patterns in my thinking and tracking my growth as a leader. The act of writing forces me to articulate thoughts and feelings that might otherwise remain vague and unprocessed. It helps me identify when I'm repeating certain types of mistakes or when I'm handling similar situations more effectively than I did in the past. Restorative rhythms also include practices that remind you why you chose leadership in the first place. It's easy, in the midst of difficult decisions and challenging situations, to lose sight of the positive impact you're having, the people you're helping to grow, the meaningful work you're enabling. I make it a practice to regularly connect with people who have been positively affected by decisions I've made or initiatives I've led. This isn't about feeding my ego. It's about maintaining perspective on the value of the work and the worthiness of the challenges. These conversations remind me that the loneliness and difficulty of leadership serve a purpose. They're not arbitrary suffering, but rather the necessary cost of creating positive change and enabling others to do their best work. I also want to talk about the importance of professional development specifically focused on the emotional and psychological aspects of leadership. Many leadership development programs focus on skills, strategic thinking, communication, financial management, but fewer address the internal experience of leadership. Seeking out coaching, training, or other development opportunities that help you understand and manage the emotional dimensions of leadership is not a sign of weakness. It's a recognition that leadership effectiveness depends not just on what you know and what you can do, but on how well you can manage yourself under pressure. I've worked with executive coaches who help me understand my own patterns of response to stress, identify early warning signs of burnout, and develop more effective ways of processing difficult decisions. This investment in my own development has made me a better leader and has significantly reduced the isolation I feel in challenging situations. Let me also address something that I think is particularly important for leaders who are feeling isolated. The temptation to make leadership loneliness into a badge of honor. There's a narrative in our culture that suggests that if you're not suffering in your leadership role, you're not taking it seriously enough. There's an almost romanticized notion of the lonely leader, bearing all burdens alone, making all the hard choices without support or acknowledgement. This is not only unhealthy, it's counterproductive. Leaders who are well supported, who have outlets for processing their challenges, who maintain perspective and emotional balance, are more effective than leaders who are isolated and carrying more weight than necessary. Seeking support, building safe relationships, and taking care of your emotional and psychological health aren't signs that you're not tough enough for leadership. They're signs that you understand that leadership effectiveness depends on your ability to think clearly, maintain perspective, and make decisions from a place of strength rather than exhaustion. Some of the most effective leaders I know are also the ones who are most intentional about managing the psychological challenges of their roles. They understand that taking care of themselves isn't selfish, it's essential to their ability to serve others effectively. I want to spend a few minutes talking specifically about decision making because this is often where leadership loneliness is most acute. The weight of being the final decision maker can be overwhelming, especially when you're dealing with choices that have significant consequences and no clearly right answer. One of the things I've learned is that you can make this process less isolating without compromising your decision-making authority. The key is to be very clear about the difference between decision-making and decision-informing. As a leader, the final decision on significant matters is usually yours to make. But you can involve others extensively in the process of gathering information, analyzing options, and considering implications. You can create structured ways for people to contribute to your thinking without expecting them to carry the weight of the final choice. I've developed what I call a decision council approach for major choices. When I'm facing a significant decision, I identify a small group of people whose perspectives I value and whose judgment I trust. I'm very clear with them that I'm asking for their input to inform my decision, not to make the decision for me. I share with them whatever information I can appropriately share, explain the factors I'm considering, and ask for their thoughts on implications I might not have considered. This process gives me valuable input and helps me think through decisions more thoroughly, but it doesn't transfer the responsibility for the outcome. This approach has several benefits. First, it improves the quality of my decision-making by bringing additional perspectives to bear. Second, it helps me feel less isolated in the process, even though the final choice is still mine. Third, it helps my team members understand my thinking process, even when they don't know all the factors I'm considering. Most importantly, it creates transparency about how decisions are made without compromising my ability to make them. Team members know they'll have opportunities to provide input, but they also understand that the final responsibility and the final choice rests with me. Another strategy that has helped me manage decision-making loneliness is what I call decision documentation. For major choices, I write a brief summary of the factors I considered, the alternatives I evaluated, and the reasoning behind my final decision. This isn't for public consumption. It's a personal practice that serves several purposes. First, it forces me to be explicit about my reasoning, which often reveals gaps in my thinking or helps me identify additional factors to consider. Second, it creates a record that I can refer to later when evaluating the outcomes of decisions. Most importantly, the act of writing helps me process the emotional weight of difficult decisions. It's a way of acknowledging the significance of the choice and the responsibility I'm carrying, while also clarifying my thinking and building confidence in my reasoning. Sometimes, when I'm struggling with a particularly difficult decision, I'll write multiple versions of this documentation, exploring different choices and their potential consequences. This isn't procrastination, it's a systematic way of thinking through complex issues and building confidence in whatever choice I ultimately make. Let me also talk about the importance of celebrating decisions, even difficult ones, when they turn out well. In the midst of leadership loneliness, it's easy to focus on the challenges and to minimize the successes. But taking time to acknowledge when your decision-making process worked, when your judgment proved sound, when your leadership made a positive difference is crucial for maintaining perspective and motivation. I keep what I call a wins file, a collection of positive outcomes, thank you notes, and success stories that I can refer to when I'm doubting myself or feeling overwhelmed by current challenges. Now, let me address something that I think is particularly relevant for leaders who are struggling with loneliness, the question of whether you should stay in leadership. This isn't about ego, it's about maintaining an accurate picture of the impact of my leadership. Sometimes the weight of loneliness in leadership can make you question whether you're cut out for the role, whether the personal cost is worth the professional benefits, whether you might be happier in a different kind of position. These are legitimate questions, and I don't think there's shame in deciding that leadership isn't for you or that a particular leadership role isn't a good fit. Not everyone is called to leadership, and not every leadership opportunity is right for every leader. But before you make that decision, I encourage you to first try implementing some of the strategies we've discussed. Try building safe circles, practicing strategic vulnerability, developing restorative rhythms, and improving your decision-making processes. Give yourself time to develop these skills and see if they change your experience of leadership. In my own journey, there was a period where I seriously considered stepping back from leadership. The loneliness felt overwhelming, the pressure felt unsustainable, and I wasn't sure the impact was worth the personal cost. But instead of making that change immediately, I decided to first invest in learning how to manage the challenges more effectively. I found an executive coach, joined a peer leadership group, and started being more intentional about my restorative practices. The change wasn't immediate, but over time my experience of leadership transformed significantly. The challenges didn't disappear, they're inherent to the role, but my ability to manage them improved dramatically. I want to be clear that I'm not suggesting you should suffer in silence. What had felt like overwhelming isolation became manageable solitude. What had felt like unbearable pressure became meaningful responsibility. Sometimes leadership roles are genuinely not a good fit, organizations are genuinely dysfunctional, or the personal cost genuinely outweighs the benefits. But many leaders who feel overwhelmed by the loneliness of their roles could find significant relief by implementing strategies to manage those challenges more effectively. As we near the end of our conversation today, I want to leave you with a few specific actions you can take if loneliness of leadership is something you're struggling with. First, assess your current support system honestly. Do you have people you can talk to about leadership challenges who will understand the complexity without judging you for the difficulty? If not, make finding or building these relationships a priority. This might mean joining professional organizations, seeking out a coach, or reaching out to other leaders in your network. Second, examine your own practices around vulnerability and transparency. Are there ways you could be more open about challenges without compromising your effectiveness? Are there opportunities to admit uncertainty, acknowledge difficulty, or share your thinking process that might strengthen rather than weaken your relationships with your team? Third, evaluate your restorative rhythms. What practices help you process stress, maintain perspective, and reconnect with your sense of purpose? If you don't have consistent practices like this, experiment with different approaches until you find what works for you. Fourth, consider your decision-making processes. Are there ways to involve others more effectively in gathering information and analyzing options while still maintaining your responsibility for final decisions? Are there practices that would help you feel more confident in your choices and less isolated in making them? Finally, remember that leadership loneliness is not a character flaw or a sign that you're not strong enough for your role. It's a common experience that reflects the real challenges of leadership responsibility. The goal isn't to eliminate it entirely. Some degree of solitude is inherent to leadership roles, but to manage it in ways that allow you to be effective and fulfilled in your position. The loneliness of leadership is real, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming. With intentional effort to build support systems, develop healthy practices, and maintain perspective, you can thrive in leadership roles even when they require you to carry significant responsibility. You know, as I sit here by this fire thinking about our conversation today, I'm reminded of something a mentor told me years ago. He said that leadership is often like tending a fire. It requires constant attention, careful judgment about when to add wood and when to let it burn, and the wisdom to know that the fire serves not just you, but everyone who gathers around it for warmth and light. The loneliness of leadership, he suggested, is similar to the solitude of the fire tender. There are moments when you must stand alone, making decisions about how to maintain the flame, carrying responsibility that others don't share. But the purpose of that solitude is not isolation for its own sake. It's the necessary space to tend something that serves everyone. This metaphor has stayed with me because it captures both the reality of leadership loneliness and its purpose. The loneliness isn't meaningless suffering. It's the space required to carry responsibility well, to make thoughtful decisions, to hold the complexity that others don't need to hold. But just as a fire tender isn't permanently alone, they're part of a community that benefits from their work. Leaders don't have to be permanently isolated. We can find connection, support, and understanding while still carrying our unique responsibilities. As we wrap up today's conversation, I want to leave you with a challenge and an invitation. The challenge is this. If you're in a leadership position, take an honest assessment of how you're managing the loneliness that comes with your role. Are you carrying more weight than necessary? Are you more isolated than you need to be? Are there support systems you could build, practices you could develop, or relationships you could cultivate that would help you be more effective and more fulfilled? Don't wait for the loneliness to become overwhelming before you address it. The best time to build support systems is when you don't desperately need them, when you can approach them from a position of strength rather than crisis. The invitation is this. If you recognize leadership loneliness in yourself or others, be willing to talk about it. Be willing to admit that leadership is challenging, that the responsibility can be heavy, that the isolation is real. Your willingness to be honest about these challenges doesn't undermine your authority. It gives others permission to seek help when they need it. And if you're not in a leadership position but you work with leaders, remember that the people making decisions about your work, your organization, your team, are human beings carrying significant responsibility. A little empathy for the complexity of their roles, a little appreciation for the weight they carry, can go a long way toward building the kind of workplace where everyone can thrive. Thank you for joining me at the fire today. Thank you for listening, for reflecting, for being willing to consider these difficult but important questions about leadership. Remember, the loneliness of leadership is not a life sentence. It's a challenge that can be managed, a burden that can be shared appropriately, a difficulty that can be transformed into strength. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and keep tending those fires that light the way for others. Until our next conversation, this is Dr. Ikechukwu Okoh, reminding you that great leadership begins with understanding yourself. Goodbye.